last time I did go live, you disappeared on me.
What happened? Oh, I went and got coffee, didn't I?
I can't
Or did I go
remember.
get coffee or something happened?
You had something going on, I think. I feel like it was deeper than just coffee. Although, I mean, coffee's pretty deep, right?
Yeah. I think what happened was I realized I got up to turn, I had the radio going on the Apple TV.
Yeah.
I had like some worship music going and I'd forgotten. So I got up to turn that off and then realized the dogs were outside and then they wouldn't come in. Well, they would come in, but they were lollygagging.
You gotta hate it when the dogs are lollygagging.
Sometimes they do. They just trot. They just like, we're coming.
Do they not know?
They're like, we're coming.
Do they not know that you've got a podcast in process? All right, I'm gonna do the share stuff here.
Look.
Yeah.
One of them knows. Look.
Who's that?
That's Murphy.
That's Murph.
Look at Murph. Murph. Are you gonna be on a podcast today, Murph?
Turning his head.
Yeah.
Murph's just chilling
comes
with
in
you today.
Yeah, no, bro. Anytime I come to my office and sit down and I'm studying whatever, Murph, he is just turning his head. He's talking about me. he comes in here and lays right there in that spot.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I'll be studying. I'll be doing a podcast. He won't leave. And you know what's funny is he can't hear it now because I got my headphones in. But when Murph hears the you know when you go like Command Q and you close out your windows,
yeah,
and you hit the finder if you accidentally scan through and you're going Command Q, you know, like Command Tab pops up everything, and you go Command Q, and you hit on the finder and it goes doing like that sound.
Yeah,
he knows that sound now, and as soon as he hears that, he jumps up because he knows I'm closing everything out and getting ready to leave.
That's awesome. That is amazing. All right. Good old Murph. It's amazing how smart they just learn. They just know the stuff.
Weird. It's so weird.
All right, let me do that there. Let me update that. Let me share this on X real quick. Okay, that's weird. Okay, let me share it here. Repost that bad boy. I think we're good to go. We got through that quick. Instagram worked. YouTube worked. Facebook worked. What?
That means we're ready to go.
So we're ready to rock and roll today. So we don't have a Ken Basarki, Chief Meteorologist, weather report, Ken. So you're gonna have to wing it today. Can you give us the weather report from Dayton, Ohio today?
Checking the outlook for the weather for the rest of the month of August. Temperatures will be in the mid 80s to low 90s for the rest of the month. Summer is still with us.
God have mercy, it's been hot.
Isn't it crazy?
Holy mackerel, man. I got home the other night. We got home from vacation. My grass looked like a jungle and I had to mow. And it was 88 degrees at 8:00 at night. Like, what the world, man?
I know.
Craziness.
I had, did you see, by the way, did you see the request for, Bishop Daniel, Gospel for Asia, asking potentially to be a guest on the podcast? It's from
I did not
Exponential.
See that.
It's you know, KP Yohanan.
Mm-hmm.
It's his son. I guess maybe my son in the gospel, the son of Mission Field Pioneer. No, it says it's but anyway, was asking for a potential appearance on, been listening to the podcast and looking for a potential appearance on our podcast.
Interesting. I just pulled that up. Okay. All right. We'll have to check that out. All right.
The Gospel for Asia.
The Gospel for Asia. Okay. We'll check
Dr.
that out.
K.P. Yohanan. He died in 2024.
Yohanan. That's a good name.
Yo. Anytime your name starts with yo.
Yo. Bishop K.P. Yo Mama.
that would be the in your face gospel for Asia. Here you go. Can you put this on the chat? Look.
I'll try. I think I can only do it on.
Can't do pics.
I think I can only do it on Facebook. Yeah, it won't do it on Restream. So I can add it on Facebook.
So, bro, we got a great topic for today. This
is one
of those. This is one of those that is in the sweet spot of what we do. I'm getting ready to go. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm flying so we're driving to St. Louis today to take Audrey to college, and then move in tomorrow's at 9 a.m. Then at 6 p.m. I fly out for Hartford, Connecticut. And on Thursday morning at 9 a.m., I am the world headquarters representative for the Connecticut District Conference. And so I've got a bunch of statistics and data and details, because in their district conference, they've already given me the schedule.
Yeah.
They do all of their presentations not in between election times. So I will be filling in.
Oh.
It shows like, and I'll have to clarify this, but it shows that that the elections will be held because it gives you like time, 9 a.m. to 9:30, 9:30 to 10, whatever. And so it's like 9:30 to 10, it is. So 9 to 9:30 is like the roster committee is announced and seated, the tabulating committee, all those things. And then explanation of the various voting procedures and whatever. And then at 9:30, I think it said that there was it had a list of presentations from all the departments, and then like 10 o'clock started elections, or 10:30 or something like that. So I wanted to have a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to come at them we're just going to talk about missiology. We're going to talk about the mission. So a lot of the statistic and data I had brewing.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hopefully you can go and get our good friend, the district superintendent, Bishop John Petoskey. Get him just fired up. Great conference out there. Winter Fire was amazing this year.
Winter Fire was actually a really good conference.
Fantastic.
People,
and we're not just saying that because we were a part of it. We're just saying like it was a legit amazing conference.
That is true. Would it be amazing next year if we weren't a part of it?
Not nearly as amazing.
So I don't know. I'm suggesting that maybe you go this coming year, although I haven't seen, maybe I've missed it, our invitation for 2026.
No, not yet, but it's, okay. I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure it's in the mail. I'm sure it's in the mail.
I'd be crazy if it weren't.
Be crazy if it weren't. We just got a howdy from Betty White, which makes me a little nervous. Betty White calling out from the grave. Howdy, Betty. So, all right, you ready to rock and roll? We better get going before we get in trouble. And away from Charles being Atlantis, we got him coming from all over the place. We did get a weather report. Kim Bastarkey says it's 82 degrees, high of 90 degrees in Northeast Ohio. It's hot, but not humid, thank the Lord. So always looking.
The sanctified meteorologist.
Kim Bastarkey, always looking on the bright side of the weather.
Yes, it's hot, but not humid.
That should be his moniker. Always looking on the bright side.
That's it.
All right, let's go. We got to get you out of here because you got traveling to do. Drop the daughter off at college, so
let's do it.
All right, here we go. The Excel got me. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Kris Dillingham, alongside my big brother, Ken Dillingham, Jr. the Third, back from a little reprieve and vacation, Ken.
Yeah.
And
how you feeling?
We survived the great bear attack of the Smoky Mountains. Video.
Did you put that on? Did you put it on social media?
It is on social media. Yeah. So we're sitting there. We turned the driveway into a pickleball court, which was a little bit interesting because there were some dangerous slopes and the pickleball going down the hill and all that kind of stuff. We're playing pickleball, and all of a sudden, man, this bear, black bear, comes up behind us on the other side, walking up the deal 10, 12 feet away from us, just chilling, just totally chilling, looking at us. And my man walks right over to our vehicle, looks at us
like it was like he was going to get he forgot his phone in the seat of the car.
Grabs a hold of it with the handle with his mouth, opens the door, stands up on his hind legs, and just looks at us like, yeah, I'm about to do this. And
he looked at you like, hey, don't mind me.
It's all good. No worries.
I do this all the time.
Yeah.
I'm a trained professional.
And the dude got in our back seat, and you can't really see it in the video, but he just sat. He just turned around and sat down in the back seat and just like, I'm just going to stay here. So
when you kept saying you mentioned that he got in the back seat, and I'm thinking to myself, how?
It's unbelievable. It was absolutely amazing. And I wish you can't really see it in the video, but like in person, it's hysterical. He's literally just sitting there looking at us out of the back seat. And then I had to do it, Ken. I had to do it.
You did?
We couldn't get him out, and I had to bust out the preacher voice on him, and he obeyed the preacher voice. I gave him the preacher voice command to get out, and he immediately took off running. He knew. He knew.
That is so fun. And my first thought was, no, I'm not even going to say that.
Never mind. The filter just kicked in. So then the next night, I don't think I posted a video of this. The next night we're playing games. It was like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And I look out, and there's another one on our porch, just looking in the window, walking around, looking. It's crazy, man. So you can go all the time to Smoky Mountains and not see a bear. We had 2 in 2 days. So pretty cool.
And they're over there singing, "The bare necessity, the simple bare necessity."
It's almost mandatory. When you see the bear, you got to do it. You got to do it.
So your worries and your strife.
Dude, you could do Disney voices, bro. The Mel Blanc. Is it Blanc or Blanc? Mel Blanc of the. Wasn't he Bugs Bunny?
He was. Oh yes, he was
Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and all that. So it's awesome. It's awesome. All right. Well, we're gonna get in today and get this because you've got big time things happening there. Audrey is going to college. She's going to Urshan College.
Yeah,
it's gonna be an amazing thing. So packing up and heading out today. So we're going to get in and get out today and get this rocking. But this is going to be a good conversation. So we appreciate everybody joining us, being a part. Do us a favor, hit the share button, get the word out, because we got a hot topic today. And I'm gonna just do a real brief setup.
I think that's good.
Since you've been prepping and planning for Connecticut District Conference, you're ready to rock and roll on this one. So to set you up and let you just go with this. But we've been talking a lot about one of the things that you brought up, and I don't even know how long ago it's been, but you've been talking about the missional ecosystem.
Yep.
And I think our goal and our focus has been just like in personal discipleship. The goal is like, what is the holistic approach? Like, what is the what does wholeness look like in personal discipleship? But we've also been on this journey of what does wholeness look like, a wholeness perspective on the mission. Because a lot of times what can happen is you can evaluate the flaws, the places where you're weak. And then what happens is you kind of swing on the pendulum, or you overemphasize the places where you're weak to the neglect of the places that are necessary and needful, but maybe have just gotten out of balance a little bit. And so we've had a lot of conversations about what does a missional ecosystem, a healthy missional ecosystem look like. And so today we're going to talk about how the Jesus mission model, or how Jesus's missional model mirrors the balanced missional ecosystem. So why don't you get us, you've done the deep dive study on a lot of this stuff. So why don't you get us kicked off? And I feel like this is what I want to say is, like, this is a topic that is relevant towards leaders, pastors,
Very true.
ministry, whatever, but also to the everyday believer.
It absolutely is,
because they're the thing that makes that happen. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important. And as you mentioned, I think that's I don't know that there would be a better way to demonstrate or to have that conversation about what a balanced missional ecosystem is than how you alluded to it, or in your opening remarks. That introduction was spot on, because I think that as you mentioned, what happens is sometimes we look at kind of excuse me, those people that have been on here, that have been with us for quite a while, know that we talk about the attractional model church, and we talk about the shortcomings of that. We talk about why in some ways that isn't the best or the biblical model, that it's not the Jesus model. And sometimes what happens is people that don't take a deep dive. And I think this is some of the people that know that we've been in a health journey.
Yeah.
I think they understand that some of what we've talked about in our health journey is to understand that, you might say, oh, this has been our predominant mechanism or model for our health. And then you read something and you say, oh, that's not it at all. It's this.
Yeah.
But then over time you begin to realize, well, it's not that it's not this. It's just that you weren't doing this, which is an extremely critical piece. And so I think when we talk about a balanced missional ecosystem, we're really talking about a model that Jesus employed. And, real briefly here, I think that it's important for us to, when we talk about the model that Jesus employed, you might say, okay, well, what was Jesus's balanced missional ecosystem? And then we'll dive into the statistics. But I believe that what we see with Jesus is that Jesus did have a balanced missional ecosystem. And what we mean by ecosystem is, an ecosystem is sort of that environment in which all things work best in an interrelated way. An ecosystem is, like, for example, part of our ecosystem is great example. Okay. Because I'm prone to giving great examples. A balanced ecosystem in our world would be one in which the carbon footprint is offset by the trees and the plants and whatever that consume carbon dioxide, and then they take and process, and through the process of photosynthesis and whatever, they process that, and they process it into oxygen, right? So the carbon dioxide that is the result of the burning of fossil fuels, and not only the burning of fossil fuels, but it's the process of, like, methylating carbon. So we breathe oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. The trees take in the carbon dioxide and output
The balance.
oxygen,
Yeah,
and that's a balanced ecosystem. And one of the ways that we have talked about this in past podcasts is that the New Testament system was sort of a chaotic system. And by chaotic, it really chaotic is another way of looking at sort of the chaos and order of sort of a balanced missional ecosystem. That's more of a logistical or systematic view. But Jesus did address the crowds. Jesus
sure.
did have corporate gatherings. Jesus did talk to the multitudes on the hillside when he gave the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus did go into communities and heal the entire town, the entire community. So Jesus did have large crowd corporate gathering environments. Then oftentimes we find Jesus going into homes and into communities and had sort of mid-sized meetings. He went into the house. The Bible said there was no room, and so they tore the roof off and let that paralytic person down in the middle of the room. Why? Because the house was crowded and full. How many people were in the house? I don't know. I don't know what a first century Jewish home would be able to. How many occupants would be able to be there? Maybe say 30, maybe 40 people,
Right.
50 in a large home. So there's sort of a mid-size meeting. And then there were smaller discipleship connections. Jesus had sort of this would be sort of the micro disciple ecosystems, the 12 disciples, the three, Peter, James, and John. Sometimes he would pull them aside. And then of course one-on-one engagement. Examples of that would be the woman at the well, the rich young ruler, Jesus and Nicodemus, and so on. So I think that when we look at, okay, so how do we reflect the balanced missional ecosystem of Jesus? How do we see mission happening in all of those spaces? And I think this is so important for us to understand that Jesus was reaching for people and pulling them into the kingdom. He was demonstrating the better way of the kingdom when he was doing it, when he was speaking to crowds. He was showing the better way of the kingdom when he was healing everybody in a city. All of it was about bringing people out of their place and into the better that he was offering them in all of those places. And so in all of those places, there was missional work being done. And there was also the undergirding of the message of the kingdom that was happening in all those places. So if we look at a balanced missional ecosystem, what we would not do is we would not say, we do our biggest evangelistic moment is our Sunday gathering. And then what we do from the Sunday gathering is we glean new converts or interested people into small group teaching settings, and then we teach them. And if you look at a balanced missional ecosystem, it would be an ecosystem where, and this is pretty interesting, there's some fluidity that happens. Some of the people from the crowd became some of the people in the homes and communities. Some of the people in the homes and communities become part of the smaller discipleship connections. Some of the smaller discipleship connections became one-on-one engagements, but then in the reverse, some one-on-one engagements created the small discipleship connections. So you see it flowing in every direction, and there's interplay and there's dynamic between all of it. And so the question would be not, how do we go from the large to the mid-size to the small to the one-on-one, or how do we go? It's none of that.
100%. And that's where I was gonna go because was it, oh man, who had that? The concentric circles, um,
That was that Rick Warren?
I think it was Rick Warren. I think it was Rick Warren, which
How to
was
get people from how to get them from the crowd to community or congregation commitment. Isn't that what it was?
whatever they were, it was like the 4 rings. And
Mhm.
I think there's some pieces where he was onto something there, but I think it was a part again of really more about how do we build, bigger churches, and how do we attract more people, because you got to figure out, well, how do we appeal and appeal to
Mm,
the crowd people to get them in to become part of the congregation. How do we get the congregation piece to be
hmm
part of the
hmm
committed people, and how do we get committed
Yep.
people to be part of the core?
Core.
And
That was right. That's that right. Right. Crowd, congregation, committed, core. That's exactly right. Yep.
so what we're saying is, as you were talking there, I was just sitting here thinking about, like, there's some culture elements. One of the things we've talked a lot about, there's some culture elements that are hard to replicate in our culture, in our world today, that we're just a part of the predominant culture of the day of Jesus. But what we're talking about are the principles that are applicable in any context, whatever. And so we're trying to
Exactly.
say, like, okay, what does that healthy ecosystem like? There ought to be elements and components. There are valuable
Hmm.
components of each of those things that are necessary for us to be healthy. So for example, I'll just use this as like an example, right? I
Okay.
think I think that the cafe worship,
Hmm.
the house church, whatever, is a reflexive movement. Again, it's the same
Hmm.
thing. It was
Hmm.
the evaluation of statistics and saying, look, there's a generation that's not interested in the big. So let's go over here and let's do the small, because small is
Hmm.
going to be better. And the reality is, the same elements that can make the big gatherings, have some negative pieces to it, are the same. They can apply in a small group. The size component is really irrelevant in that. So what we're
Hmm.
saying is,
So good, dude.
we're not
So
evaluating
what you're saying
statistics.
is it's not more it's not more it's not more relevant if you get together and you just have 30 or 35 people in an intimate place playing a guitar,
Right.
singing some songs, and like somehow that's uniquely better or more desirable than people coming into this big auditorium and whatever, right? Like you're saying, it's
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
so the
And the
question
and
would the question be to you, would the question be then that what can happen in a mid-sized group that cannot happen in a crowd? That is that the is that
100%.
the
So for me, when we start talking about this, is like, okay, there are pieces and components that are needed for healthy spiritual life,
Mhm,
to live as a disciple of Jesus. There are components of each of the things you talked about that are totally necessary. And
mhm,
so if you overemphasize one to the neglect of the
mhm,
of another, now all of a sudden you've gotten a little bit out of balance. For example, we know that the individual piece is the purest form, right? You have a
mhm,
person, they're living on mission, they find disciple
mhm.
people and whatever. But not just that, but they're also living in personal relationships and connections with brothers and sisters in the body of Christ. Like,
Yep.
that's a needful piece. But there's also a needful piece for us to gather together in the large group as the large family of God, coming together for the cause and the purpose. Um, Without that, you can get isolation. If you
Mhm,
don't have the connectedness to something bigger than just yourself, now all of a sudden there's independence, there's isolation, all that can happen. The flip side, if all you have is just the big crowd, now you don't have individual responsibility, you don't have personal connection, you might feel detached. So
mhm,
the point of what you're saying, which I think is so awesome, is all of these things are we're a part of the ministry of Jesus, which built a movement that turned their world upside down. And what we want to do is not say, let's evaluate statistics, let's evaluate culture and figure out how do we do the things that need to
mhm,
make the church bigger or whatever. It's no, what do we do to make the body of Christ the healthiest it can be? Because when it's healthy, growth is naturally going to happen, expansion's naturally going to happen. You're going to have all of these things are a part of this ecosystem of the body of
mhm.
Christ.
Well, let me share something really, really weird, man. While you were talking, it was so crazy. While you were talking, like literally felt like the Lord speaking something into my spirit,
Yeah.
and and just see what you think about this. Okay, when we talk about an ecosystem, particularly when we're talking about a balanced ecosystem, sometimes you might look at it and you may say, wow, there's some ecosystem that's really fragile, right? There's some, if just a little bit here and a little bit there, and it's really fragile. And
Right.
I don't want to get off into, man, I don't want to get off into like global warming and whatever, but like, to some, they would say that the ecosystem is so fragile that with a 1 degree temperature change, we're going to melt the polar ice caps and it's going to eliminate, 10% of the population is going to die and, the world's going to go in upheaval. And
Right.
yet we see a world, but then the same people are the people that say, well, there's an evolutionary process and there's survival of the fittest, and that's just part of it. And, so anyway, I don't want to
Right.
get off into that, but I'm just simply giving an example of how you might view an ecosystem. And I think here's what I felt like the Lord, he didn't share me that part. This is the part that, that was my adding on to what God had. But what I felt the Lord dropped into my heart was, look at, in any ecosystem, you may have, for example, omnivores, um, animals that eat both, plants, herbs, animals, that they, the omnivores have an opportunity or have the propensity to basically be able to get nutrition from all kinds of sources.
Yeah.
And so in an environment where you have a balanced ecosystem, an omnivore would probably be much more, much less fragile than an animal that has one food source. If that one food source goes away, then that animal is no longer able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But an animal that has multiple food sources, if a particular food source goes away,
Right.
then it just eats another food source. And so its adaptability is based upon its the balanced scope of its diet,
Sure.
right? If you have
Sure.
one animal that eats one kind of thing, like you have rabbits and it only eats clover. And if somehow like a clover disease came along, all rabbits would die because they
Yeah.
only eat clover.
Yeah.
But if they eat grass and they eat, whatever, then rabbits are like, oh, the clover's gone. I guess I'm going to go eat what. And I think that when we talk about a balanced missional ecosystem, and I think we saw this at COVID,
Mm-hmm.
churches that are predominantly attractional model, large gathering missional, they are myopically that.
Yes.
Were fragile, missionally fragile at COVID. We saw it happen. We saw it unfold before our very eyes.
Yeah.
Churches that had a balanced missional ecosystem were churches that just said, oh, well, they're taking the clover away. We're going to go over here to, grass. And I think this is so important that we understand that in a balanced missional ecosystem, I think that what we're understanding is that there's missional and discipleship that's happening at the corporate level. Yes, the Sunday service has a missional component to it. Yes, there is growth and maturity and seeing the ways of God and whatever that is sometimes only best experienced in the full corporate environment.
Sure.
But then there are some things that happen in a mid-sized group. It's that, it's that 15, 20, 30. There's some things that only happen in those, there's some conversations that you're not going to have in a group of 20 people that you'll have in a group of 2 or 3 in a close knit, like what we call an X group or a small micro discipling community. And so I think that, but what we need to understand is that there is both mission and discipleship. There is be a disciple and make disciples that can happen in all of these environments, the corporate, the mid-size, the small size, and the personal one-on-one. And I think that if we have a balanced missional ecosystem, what that means is that there is the potential for doing the mission, making disciples, multiplying disciples that could happen in all of those. You could have a one-on-one conversation and a person comes to a corporate event, or you could have a one-on-one conversation and understand that that person's discipleable and they come into an X group or a group of like the 2 or 3. And so I think it's important as we look at, and let me just roll into some of the statistics real quick here. But I think if we look at some of the data of what's going on in the world today, and I think this is important because we're not talking about doom and gloom today. What we're not here to say the church is failing. We're here to show that the modern church is largely running on one gear, right? That we have to
There you go.
expand into the full Jesus model of mission.
Right.
And that's what you were talking about when you said that sometimes what happens is when you see a church running on one gear. What is that one gear that most churches in North America run on? It's the Sunday gathering, corporate, attractional model. Let's get people through the door. Let's get more guests. And we turn more guests into attenders and more attenders into members, and that's the way we're going to grow the church. And it's extremely singular in its missional perspective. And what you said was sometimes we reflex over from, okay, well, we're going to go from the corporate to the individual. And so then we begin to undervalue the corporate, or we begin to try to make, sort of these separations and so on. So let's look at the national picture.
Okay.
So the Christian share of population, right? How many people in the world, or excuse me, how many people in the United States say that they're Christian is actually has steadied. So it was on a decline, but in the most recent Pew research, about 62% of adults identify as Christian. The religiously unaffiliated nuns have grown to 29%, but that growth has kind of slowed. That was the highest percentage of Christianity for about 10 years from about 2015 to 2025. That was the highest growing incline. Currently, as of 2024, the unaffiliated, so these are people that aren't affiliated to any church, but they consider themselves Christian, is at 28%, which is the highest recorded number. But again, that number has plateaued.
Yeah.
So you look at church attendance. Church attendance is stable. It's in the low 30s. So what that means is 62% of Americans say they're Christian, about 30%. So half of people that call themselves Christian are regularly attending church. Okay. Gallup 2024 says 21% of U.S. adults attend church weekly. What that means is 21% of what? The 62% that call themselves Christian. So approximately a third. So if it was 60, for example, if it was 63%, 21% times 3 is 63%. So it's a third. So basically a third of people who call in the United States who call themselves
not unchurched,
Christian,
I say unchurched,
right.
Not unbelievers, not atheists.
Yep.
These are people that identify themselves as Christians.
Yeah. So 21% of the 62, or say 63 for just, so a third attend services weekly, with another 9% that said that they attend almost weekly, which I don't know what that means, like three times a month.
Can I throw something in there?
Throw it in.
An interesting number when you think about, and again, I'm not just trying to attack attractional church model stuff, whatever, but in an era and an age where you have more churches than ever that have top-notch, lighting and all of the things and ministries and services, online presence, all of these things, offering all of this stuff, and still only a third, not unbelievers, but only a third of people that identify as Christians see the need and value of going to gather together with other believers every week. That is interesting.
Well, I was just reading also in the other day as I was looking at the scripture where it says, forsake not the assembling of yourselves. It's interesting because he's talking about that we're not looking on our own affairs, but we're looking on the affairs of others. That we're not concerned just with our thing, but we're concerned with the thing of others. So therefore, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together as the manner of some is. right? And all the
Right.
more as you see the day approaching. Why? Because as the day approaches, as we
Yeah.
get closer and closer and closer to the return of the Lord, I think that what happens is we see people become exceeding more individualistic. You know what? I
Sure.
don't have the bandwidth to worry about your thing. I got my own thing going on, and so that's an anti-biblical perspective, right? And
Right.
how's that anti-biblical perspective? How is it resolved? I think it's resolved first by gathering. Clearly, Scripture says it's resolved by gathering together with other brothers and sisters, so that if you're in their presence, if you see them physically, like they're in front of you, you are engaged with them. That forces you to consider others.
Yeah.
So the Bible says, think of others more highly than yourself, and so on and so forth. And so you can't do this from your living room watching a service. So anyway, all right. So Hartford Epic uh, poll in 2025. So this is recent to this year. I mean, we're bringing you like the most up to date statistics. 52% of congregations increased their attendance in the past 2 years, which I would say my question about that was, is that up? Is that a returning from COVID? Because
Mm.
we had an insurance agent come to our church, our Sydney campus, and asked how many people attend, and he said this is his words.
Okay.
Works for a church insurer, and he said what we're seeing right now is seeing churches of 300 to 400 seating capacity, with about 1/10 of that in their attendance on Sundays.
Holy moly. What?
So
That's
I thought that,
crazy.
yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I don't know. I don't know. Is is 52% growth attendance? See, this is the thing. Here is the two-edged sword of quote unquote attendance. Attendance does not tell you whether or not you're being missionally successful.
Right.
Attendance just simply says we've got more in 2025 than we had in 2024 or 2023.
Yeah.
So there's a growth. So, are you back to where you were pre-COVID? So anyway, I think the other thing is the other statistic from it's a fact research, Hartford research poll. 70% of U.S. congregations have equal to or less than 100 people. But this is interesting, okay? 70% of U.S. congregations have 100 or less people, but serve only 14% of worshipers. That poll got me right there.
Interesting.
So 70% of churches in America are 100 or less,
Right.
but they only serve 14% of worshipers. Meanwhile, this is crazy, the same exact number. I love data where it helps me remember. Okay. So 70% of congregations are 100 and less, but they only serve 14% of worshipers. 70% of worshipers attend the largest 10% of churches.
Wow.
250 or more in attendance. So that's
Wow.
staggering. 10% of the churches, 10% of the churches house 70% of Christian Sunday worship attenders. And yet 70% of the churches. So 70% of attenders go to 10% of the churches, but 70% of the churches
Right.
are
Right.
100 or less, which are only 14% of all Sunday worshipers.
Right. And church attendance. So what it sounds like is confirmation of what we talked about before, where you have the larger churches are drawing people away from the smaller churches. They're not, it doesn't
That's what I wanted to
appear
know about the 52% number, Chris.
it doesn't
That
appear like there's a
52%,
missional.
yeah, 52-48. It almost looks like 50% are shrinking and 50% are growing. Is that
Yeah.
showing this number?
Right.
One is
Right.
losing members and one's just gaining them. Is it just shifting? This number that's diminishing, it's an equal, I don't know.
It's very interesting. Very interesting. And right, there's a lot of places I'd love to dig a little deeper and find out, because I mean, we've heard that like millennial and Gen Z young men,
Mhm.
there's a return of young men coming back to the faith. But the question then becomes, okay, but they've been raised in an environment where church attendance has not been obviously a
Right.
centerpiece.
Right.
And so what does that look like for them when they're coming back to faith? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Bro.
And here's the thing about statistics that are always, you know, I think it's important. This is why I go back to like the principle piece is what's important, because if you're always chasing trends, if you're always
Yeah.
chasing statistics,
Yeah.
like how these statistics just 7 years ago were
Yes.
so much different than
Right.
what they like you talk about the decrease of people that identified as Christian and the increase of no affiliation, no
Right.
faith
Right.
system or whatever.
Right.
And then now you have like, okay, well, it seems like those numbers have kind of plateaued. If you're doing everything you can to try to stop that number, now all of a sudden you're like, well, the numbers have changed. Now I got to figure out what's next to meet the current trends and the current statistics. And this is
Hmm.
why what you said at the beginning about the ecosystem, I think, is so important. And maybe we could dive into, I don't know if you got more stats, but just kind of go
Yeah.
through and talk about this is why each of these components of the
Yeah.
healthy ecosystem
Yeah.
have value and will have value
Yeah.
regardless of the cultural trends around us, regardless of what's
Hmm.
happening in the church. It can help us identify places where we've got to more clearly articulate and communicate the principles of the kingdom, the values of the kingdom to people so they understand, like, okay, so if people are thinking, well, I don't need to go to church on Sunday, I can sit in my PJs and drink coffee and
Hmm.
still grow and whatever. You're missing the components that you talked about and some of the elements of that.
Hmm.
So maybe you want to talk about like the functions of each
Yeah.
of these and kind of walk through those. I don't know if you have more statistics, but
Yeah, let's do this. So one of the things I think that highlights what you're talking about is, and I'll go into because I think our the statistics about discipleship, and I don't know, maybe we could return next week and do
okay,
the last two data points
let's
because
do it.
maybe we could do a back to back, and I think we've got too much information to go through all today.
Sure.
I mean but I think that so let's just slow down a little bit. And I want to let's do the discipleship and evangelism piece because I think that matches up with, you know, understanding a balanced missional ecosystem. So what we've got left, let me just share this so that people understand where we're kind of coming from here. Okay.
Right, right.
Um, so we're taking a look at the national picture. Then what we're going to discuss next is evangelism and discipleship climate. Um, and then next week, what we'll do is we'll talk about we'll do a little bit more of the data, and then talk about kind of what this means for really creating a balanced missional ecosystem for the future. But I think that just to highlight what you just said, Kris. Okay, if you're chasing trends, um, I don't think there's any better way to explain this than what you just said about the nuns. All right, so what do we know? Okay, based upon the data, 62% of Americans claim to be Christian.
Okay,
62% of Americans claim to be Christians. Okay, so
okay,
there are 340 million Americans right now.
okay.
So 62%, let's just, for round numbers, 62% of 340 million is roughly 200 million.
200 million, right.
Yeah. 180. So 60 times 300, 60 times 300 would be 180, and 60 times 40 million would be,
240.
24. So yeah. So 26, whatever. So you could say, 210, 220,
Yeah.
whatever. Okay. But let's just round the numbers off and say 60% of 340 million is about 200 million people. So 200 million people in the United States say that they're Christian. So when you look at those numbers and you really look at, like, for example, church attendance, 20%, 21% attend weekly. So that would mean 40 million of the 200 million. But it also suggests, as you
Interesting.
just mentioned, about the nuns, which are 28%, the religiously unaffiliated.
It's almost
Okay.
30%.
Okay. So 30% of 200 million is 60 million. So you could say there are 60 million people who are not affiliated with any church. They just do their own religious thing, I guess. They go, if they want to go over here, they go over here. If they want to go over there, they go over there. They're not, I don't know if this means that they're non-denominational. I don't know if this is part, this is the thing that we have to be able to say, is to say we can't make the numbers say something that we don't know what they're saying.
That's
This is
exactly
why you
right.
got to dig into the research. I don't know if the unaffiliated is part of the great de-churching. I don't know if this is, like you said, if this is part of people who say, I'm fed up with the church. I don't know if this means that this is just people that just simply say, I don't want to, is it confusion that says, well, this church says this and that church says that, and I don't even know what to believe. And so I'm just a
Yeah.
nothing,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I do think it's important to know there's 60 million people that are religiously unaffiliated, as opposed to 40 million that every single Sunday are faithfully committed to a body of Christ that they're in community with and they're in communion with in a way that is biblically accurate,
Yeah.
at least on the surface. I mean, we don't know if the church has connectivity or whatever, but I'm just saying, I think this is important for us to identify that there are 30% of people of the 200 million.
Yeah.
There's 60 million Christians in America that consider themselves not Christian by name only. I don't know what you would call it, a rhino or a sino, Christian in name
Christian in name
only.
only.
Yeah. But I think that it's important that there are 60 million people that consider themselves devoted Christians that don't have a commitment to a particular body of Christ, maybe, or maybe that just is a religious affiliation saying, I don't call myself Baptist, I don't call myself Pentecostal, I don't, whatever. Okay. So, but I think the thing that is important to note is that when you look at that number, that 21% that attend weekly, okay? I
Yeah.
mean, clearly, very weekly. It's 21% of 200 million, or roughly 40 million, like we just mentioned. Okay. What that means is that, okay, so we've had an entire generation that was not raised in a balanced missional ecosystem. And in a
Right.
balanced
Right.
missional ecosystem, what happens
So
is
good.
that you get a balanced perspective about what happens at a corporate level and what my personal responsibility is.
Absolutely.
That's why we must have a balanced missional
So good.
ecosystem. And the problem is if you don't have a balanced missional ecosystem, Kris, you turned me onto this about 2 months ago when you talked about reframing what volunteerism looks like, and I took it and ran with it, bro. I
You
mean,
went crazy with it.
I did, and you laid it in front. We did an entire July serving initiative at Lifeway, and the idea was to reframe what it looks like to serve. And where do you serve? And we built it off the balanced missional ecosystem model. And what we said was that your personal responsibility isn't just to volunteer at the corporate level. But if you do not have a balanced missional ecosystem, then what happens is that in that model, so much weight is put on the Sunday gathering that your assumption is that my primary personal responsibility is how do I plug in to that Sunday
Right.
model? Where am I
So
serving?
good.
So you say, where am I serving? Where am I volunteering? Blah 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 blah. But without a balanced missional ecosystem, you don't get any framework that says I have a responsibility to my brothers and sisters in Christ. I have a responsibility to bear one another's burdens. What does that look like and where, right? And so yeah, well, we have a responsibility to bear one another's burdens. Well, if you have a single gear model, then the idea is, boy, we've got a lot of people whose burdens aren't being borne. We need a burden bearer ministry at our church. And so we create a burden bearers ministry. We're going to call it burden bearers. It's biblical. And all of a sudden people go, you know what? I have a burden for the burden bearer ministry. And so they personal responsibilities, they're going to plug in right here. But in a balanced missional ecosystem, I think what happens is people begin to realize I understand my responsibility that becomes even more personal when I'm engaged with people at the mid and smaller levels, even at the micro level. I know those people and I know what they're going through. And so now I'm not serving a role at the macro. I'm serving my kingdom responsibility because I know people. And Kris, I think it bears out in the evangelism and discipleship. And I'm going to throw it to you because I want to go through these stats before we're done today, because I think it bears into people feeling their missional responsibility. But I think that this is a great demonstration of how that an unbalanced missional ecosystem, a Sunday-centric, an attractional model, a gather to grow model. I think what happens is it though there is some discipleship that happens there, though there is some challenge, though there is some awareness of our connection and commitment to the corporate body, though there is missional impact to that it begins to reach a place of diminishing returns at some critical levels. And I think that's being borne out where people feel like, well, church is being done for me. I chose that church because I like the way they do things. I like what they're offering. I like their programs and services. That's why I'm going to go there. And what happens is, but if I've got to take the kids to, you're probably not going to see us very much in the summer because our travel ball goes through the summer, and so we'll probably only be there, maybe once a month over the summer because we'll be traveling on the weekends. And you're like, how do we get to that point that's acceptable for people that consider themselves committed Christians? It happens when there is either a conscious or subconscious cultivation of consumerism.
Yeah.
And so here we are.
So let's do this. Let's hold off and let's do next week, and we'll run through all four because I think it's important. I think it would have more like flow to go through all four than to try to put two of them together in pieces, because I love what you're saying here. I think what we know statistically, what you're just showing right there, that you laid out statistically about, a large number of people that identify themselves as believers, but because, and I'm gonna make this statement, and this is obviously an overgeneralization, and this is not a statement of like we have the answers and we know whatever. I'm just saying this observationally, because we have currently a church system that, as you said, runs on one gear, right? We have a system that runs on one gear, so it's not operating at its full capacity because it's only functioning on the first gear, right? So what does that produce? What you just clearly laid out, and we see it statistically and we see it anecdotally. One of two things: either a group of people that look at it and don't recognize or understand their duty and obligation to the greater body. That may mean that may present itself as people that they're not a part of any church. They don't go to any church. They just kind of, I'm going to go here for a little while. I'm going to go there for a little while, or I may just worship in my home with my family, but I'm still a Christian. They don't recognize the responsibility, or what you said, the opposite in the spectrum, but it's the same thing. A group of people that say, well, my only responsibility is to serve in this capacity. And so I'm going to go and serve in this ministry, and I've done my duty, I've done my obligation, and that's all I need to do. Let me back up. The other end of the spectrum, we talked about people that that don't go to church or whatever. But I'd also put in that same category the same group of people that are like, I'm going to go, but I'm going to consume.
Yeah.
You just serve me, and as long as you don't place higher expectations on me, then we're all good. And you provide the services that I need and that I want, then we're good. That's what happens when you have an ecosystem that's only
Yeah.
running on one
Yep.
gear. So I think part of what we've done is gone through this process of like, okay, we've identified a major issue that again, like a vehicle trying to go 70 miles an hour in first gear, and it's burning everything out. It's running at a place that it's not sustainable. We can't do that. So a lot of our journey has been like, okay, we see that we're running on one gear. How do we navigate through that? And
So true.
I think these four components are the places where we've landed that said, this is how you get a full gear system, right? You call it the operating system. You get the full gear system
Yep.
that allows you to run at full capacity. So you can go up the hills of the Smoky Mountains, and sometimes you got to put it in first gear. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to,
Yeah.
it's a difficult climb, but you put it in first gear and you're able to do that. Sometimes you get out on the open highway and man, you just let it fly and
Yep.
and you're moving. And I think as a church, the reason we've struggled missionally is not because we don't do church well, not because we don't have good preachers and teachers or good music or a lot of the things that we have felt that we need to have through the attractional model clearly are not getting the job done. That's the thing that jumped out
Yeah.
at me. Clearly that's not getting the job done. What is it? We've got to figure out a way to implement the full healthy ecosystem that allows people and the body and the church to function and to flourish in the way God intended it to be, which is what you see in the New Testament church, the book of Acts church.
Yeah. Well, I think, and maybe you could tease out what we're gonna talk about next week, because this is next week isn't going to be part two. Like, we're not doing part two next week. We're going to do another. This is a layer of a conversation. So maybe you could lay that out for what people could expect next week. I guess my finishing comments would be that what you just said, I think it bears out in the data statistics. We've talked about, and I'll tease this one. I'll tease this one percentage. Okay,
Yeah.
going into next week, and we won't really discuss it, but we'll just tease it out. And that is that in 1993, approximately 90% of Christians believed that evangelism was their personal responsibility.
What was the number again?
90%. In 1993, 90% of people believed that evangelism was their personal responsibility. In 2023, about 60% of people believe that evangelism is their personal responsibility.
What
that
in
means,
the world?
Listen to this. This is weird. That is literally a 1% decline of personal responsibility per year for 30 years. Every year from 1993 to 2023, there was a 1% decline, so that the 90% to 60%. So in 1993, 90% of Christians said, I believe that evangelism is my personal responsibility. In 2023, 60% of people believe that evangelism is their personal responsibility. So
Wow.
so what you're talking about, this idea of having a single gear system, not having a balanced missional ecosystem.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The unbalanced missional ecosystem, not only is it the unbalanced. Okay, we're not dogging the attractional church today. We're not coming against Sunday centric, whatever. What we're saying is that statistically we see a parallel between a commitment to a local congregation, and a commitment to doing the mission. Both of those numbers are almost identically decreased together over a 30-year period. The
Yeah.
numeric factor in 30 years, the decrease of people that feel like they need to have, think about it, Kris, 30% unaffiliated, a 30% decline in a personal responsibility for the mission
There you go.
over 30 years. Doc, it is
That's crazy.
staggering to consider that if you have an unbalanced, here's the assertion I'm going to make. If you have an unbalanced missional ecosystem, you are eventually going to produce people who are not committed to the local congregation, the body of Christ, and the community of believers, and they're not committed to bringing people to Jesus Christ in a personal missional way.
Man, that's wild. That's a wild number right there. That's crazy when you
That's
think
why we
about
do
that.
statistics and data.
Absolutely. And I think it was important, like you said, I think it was important to lay that foundation to explain what we're gonna get into next week. If you just get into, here are the components of a balanced ecosystem, people are like, it's just their thing, that's just whatever, and, not take too much stock in it. But with what you just laid out, the components you just laid out. So next week, what we're gonna do is come in and talk about the four pieces, the four components of what a balanced, healthy, missional ecosystem looks like and what their functions are and all that. So today we laid the foundation. We laid the groundwork for why this is necessary, how we got here, and all of that. So like you said, I think it's really important. Next week is not part two. It's because sometimes when people see part one, part two, they just focus on, I've already heard that. No. We're going to do a deep dive into all of these aspects and component of the ecosystem of why it's necessary. If we really want to be the body of Christ that he's called us to be, and the missional movement that he's called us to be, these are the things that it's going to take for us to get to that we're healthy in all of these places, not just a single one or whatever. We need to be healthy in all of these. So great conversation today. Appreciate everybody being on, everybody listening and commenting, engaging in the discussion conversation. So don't check out on us. Come back next week to hear the follow-up on this. And I think it's going to be a great discussion. So thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to coming back to you next Tuesday around 10 o'clock. Until then, go live mobilized. God bless.